There's a word that changed everything for me. One syllable, one command, one vibrational frequency that tore open every closed door I'd been staring at for years. I'm not talking about affirmations you whisper half-heartedly in the mirror while your bank account screams a different story. I'm not talking about vision boards gathering dust in your closet or manifestation journals filled with wishes that never leave the page. I'm talking about something ancient, something biblically documented, something so potent that when spoken with true understanding, it doesn't ask the universe for permission. It commands reality to shift. That word is EFATÁ. Most people have never heard it. Those who have don't know what to do with it, and that's exactly why you're still struggling. You've been using modern manifestation language, positive thinking, gratitude practices, all of which have their place, but you've been missing the key that unlocks the vault. EFATÁ isn't a suggestion. It's not a polite request to the cosmos. It's the spiritual equivalent of taking a crowbar to every sealed chamber of your financial reality and prying it wide open. When Jesus spoke this word over a man whose ears were closed, whose tongue was bound, everything changed in an instant. The man didn't gradually improve. He didn't experience a slow healing process. He was opened immediately, completely, irreversibly. And here's what nobody tells you. That same authority, that same command, that same vibrational key exists for your financial channels right now. Your prosperity isn't missing because you're unlucky or because the universe has forgotten you. It's sealed. It's blocked. It's sitting behind closed doors that you've been pushing against with all your mental effort while never speaking the one word that makes them swing open effortlessly. I know because I lived 23 years in financial suffocation. I worked hard. I believed hard. I visualized hard. Nothing moved. My income stayed stagnant. My opportunities dried up before they bloomed. My ideas never found funding. I was closed, and I didn't even know it. Then I discovered EFATÁ, not as a religious ritual, not as a magic spell, but as a frequency of opening, a command embedded in divine language that speaks directly to the energetic mechanisms governing flow in your life. The moment I understood how to use it, how to speak it with authority, how to place it over the specific areas where my abundance had been dammed up, everything began to move. Opportunities I'd given up on suddenly resurfaced. People I'd never met started reaching out with proposals. Income streams I'd been building for months without results exploded overnight. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't luck. This was the direct result of speaking the language of opening over a reality that had been locked shut. What I'm about to share with you isn't theory. It's not borrowed wisdom from someone who's never actually lived in financial struggle. This is the exact protocol I used to go from barely surviving to thriving in a state of continuous flow. And I'm going to walk you through every single step, every vibrational principle, every practical application of EFATÁ, so that by the time you finish this journey with me, you won't just understand this word intellectually. You'll know how to wield it. You'll know where to place it. You'll know how to feel the exact moment when the seal breaks and the floodgates of your prosperity swing wide open. Let's begin. EFATÁ is Aramaic. It's the language Jesus spoke when he walked the earth, the tongue of ancient power, the frequency that predates English, Spanish, Latin, all the diluted translations that came after. When you read the story in Mark 7:34, you see Jesus encountering a man who couldn't hear, couldn't speak clearly, couldn't participate fully in the world around him. He was isolated by his closed condition. Jesus didn't pray a long prayer. He didn't perform an elaborate ritual. He put his fingers in the man's ears, touched his tongue, looked up to heaven, sighed deeply, and said one word, EFATÁ, be opened. And the man's ears unlocked, his tongue loosened. He was no longer bound by closure. Now let me tell you what this really means for you. Your financial ears are closed. You can't hear the opportunities that are being spoken over your life every single day. You miss the subtle nudges, the divine appointments, the conversations that could change everything because your receptivity is sealed shut. Your financial tongue is bound. You can't speak your truth about wealth. You can't declare prosperity over your life without feeling like a fraud. You can't command your reality to shift because somewhere deep inside, you've been programmed to stay small, stay quiet, stay grateful for scraps. EFATÁ is the exact frequency that breaks both conditions simultaneously. When I first learned this word, I didn't just read about it, I researched its sonic structure. Aramaic isn't like English. Every letter carries weight. Every syllable vibrates at a specific frequency. The E sound opens the throat. The F releases breath with force. The A expands the chest cavity. The T creates a sharp, commanding pulse. The final A completes the circuit, sealing the opening in place. This isn't random. This is linguistic engineering designed to unlock what's been shut. When you speak EFATÁ out loud, your body becomes an instrument of opening. Your vocal cords, your breath, your entire energetic system aligns with the frequency of expansion. But here's where most people stumble. They hear about a powerful word and they treat it like a magic incantation. They say it once, maybe twice, expecting instant riches to fall from the sky, and when nothing immediately changes, they dismiss it as nonsense. That's not how this works. EFATÁ isn't a lottery ticket, it's a key, and keys require you to know which door you're unlocking, how much pressure to apply, and what's on the other side waiting to be accessed. You don't just shout EFATÁ into the void. You speak it with precision over the exact areas of your life where flow has been blocked. Your income, your creativity, your confidence, your visibility, your ability to receive. Let me give you a personal example. 3 years ago, I had a business idea that felt divinely inspired. I could see it clearly. I knew it would work. But every time I tried to move forward, I hit a wall. Investors weren't interested. Partners backed out. The resources I needed never materialized. I kept pushing, kept trying different strategies, kept exhausting myself against an invisible barrier. Then I learned about EFATÁ. I stopped pushing. I got quiet. I placed my hand over my heart and I spoke directly to the closed channel. EFATÁ, be opened. Every door that has been sealed against this vision, I command you to release. Every flow that's been dammed, I speak opening over you now. I felt something shift inside my chest. It wasn't dramatic. It was subtle, like a lock clicking into place. Within 72 hours, I received an email from someone I'd contacted months prior. They apologized for the delay and said they'd been thinking about my proposal and wanted to move forward. 2 days later, another door opened, then another. Within 3 weeks, every single resource I'd been begging the universe for suddenly became available. Not because I worked harder, not because I got luckier, but because I stopped trying to force open a door with my bare hands and instead used the key I'd been given. EFATÁ unlocked what effort never could. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about one business idea. This was about a completely different way of engaging with my abundance. The word EFATÁ appears only once in the entire Bible, but its principle echoes throughout every spiritual tradition that understands energy, vibration, and divine authority. In Kabbalah, they speak of removing the klipot, the shells that block divine light from entering your life. In Eastern philosophy, they talk about clearing the nadis, the energy channels that allow life force to flow freely. In quantum physics, they describe breaking through energetic resistance to access higher states of possibility. All of these are pointing to the same truth. You are not lacking abundance. You are blocked from receiving it. And EFATÁ is the sound, the command, the frequency that removes the blockage. So when I say EFATÁ is the ancient key, I mean it literally. This isn't metaphor. This isn't poetry. This is functional spiritual technology that's been hidden in plain sight for 2,000 years, waiting for someone desperate enough, hungry enough, and ready enough to pick it up and use it. You are that person. You wouldn't be here right now if you weren't. Something inside you recognized this word the moment you heard it. That recognition isn't random. It's resonance. It's your soul remembering a frequency it's been waiting to hear again. And now that you've heard it, everything changes. Here's what I need you to understand before we go further. EFATÁ doesn't work because it's magic. It works because it aligns your entire being with the vibration of opening. When you speak it with intention, you're not begging, you're not wishing, you're commanding. You're exercising the same authority that Jesus demonstrated when he looked at closed conditions and refused to accept them as permanent. You're declaring that what has been sealed in your life no longer has permission to remain that way. You're activating a frequency that reality itself must respond to because it operates on the same principles that govern all creation: energy, vibration, and the power of the spoken word. This is where your transformation begins. Not with more hustle, not with more affirmations that you don't truly believe, but with the recognition that you've been trying to open doors with your mind when you should have been using your voice. EFATÁ is that voice. It's the sound of your spiritual authority waking up. It's the frequency of sealed things breaking open. And in the next chapter, I'm going to show you exactly what happens inside your energetic field the moment you speak it with true understanding. Because once you feel that opening, once you experience that shift, you'll never go back to begging the universe for what you were always meant to command. Let me take you inside the moment of opening. Not the idea of it, not the concept, but the actual energetic event that occurs when EFATÁ is spoken with true authority over a sealed condition. Imagine a dam that's been holding back a river for decades. The water behind it is enormous, powerful, desperate to flow. But the concrete structure won't budge no matter how much pressure builds. Then someone places a single explosive charge at exactly the right structural point. One detonation. The dam cracks. The water doesn't trickle out. It explodes through the opening with all the force of everything that's been waiting behind it. That's what happens when you speak EFATÁ over your financial blockages. You're not creating the abundance. You're releasing what's already been building. Most people think they lack resources. They look at their empty bank account and conclude that prosperity simply doesn't exist in their reality. But that's a fundamental misunderstanding of how abundance operates. Divine supply isn't distributed based on worthiness or luck or even hard work. It flows according to openness. You could be the most deserving person on the planet, but if your channels are sealed, nothing can reach you. It's like standing under Niagara Falls with a closed umbrella and wondering why you're not getting wet. The water is there. The abundance is there. What's missing isn't the supply. What's missing is your capacity to receive it. And capacity is determined entirely by whether you're open or closed. I learned this the hard way. For years, I prayed for financial breakthrough. I declared prosperity scriptures. I tithed faithfully. I visualized wealth. I did everything the books told me to do, and nothing changed. I was furious. I felt betrayed by God, by the universe, by every spiritual teacher who'd promised that faith plus action equals results. What I didn't understand then was that I was trying to fill a bottle whose cap was still screwed on tight. My prayers were bouncing off a closed receiver. My declarations were spoken over sealed ears. My faith was genuine, but it was aimed at the wrong problem. I didn't need more abundance to show up. I needed the blockages removed so the abundance that was already present could finally reach me. The day I discovered this truth, I was sitting in my car after another failed business meeting. I'd pitched my services to a potential client who seemed interested, asked all the right questions, then ghosted me completely. It was the fourth time that month. Same pattern. Initial enthusiasm, then nothing. I remember gripping the steering wheel and asking out loud, what is blocking me? What am I not seeing? And in that moment of raw honesty, I felt something respond inside my chest. Not a voice, not words, just a knowing. The knowing said, you're closed. Everything you're trying to attract is hitting a wall you can't see because you're inside it. Your receiver is off. Your channels are collapsed. You need opening, not more effort. That's when I started researching the concept of spiritual blockages, energetic seals, and closed channels. I came across the story of the deaf man and the word EFATÁ, and something ignited in me. I'd read that story 100 times before, But I'd always focused on the miracle, never on the method. Jesus didn't add anything to the man. He didn't give him new ears or a new tongue. He opened what was already there, but had been sealed shut. The man's hearing existed. His speech existed. They were just inaccessible. And the moment EFATÁ was spoken, the seal broke and everything that had been dormant came alive. I realized that's exactly what I needed. Not a bigger vision, not more skills, not better connections. I needed the seal broken. So I did something that felt completely irrational. I drove to an empty parking lot, turned off the engine, and I spoke EFATÁ out loud over every area of my life where flow had stopped. I said it over my income. I said it over my relationships. I said it over my creativity. I said it over my confidence. I didn't shout it. I didn't perform it. I simply spoke it as a command, the way you'd flip a light switch or turn a key in a lock. And here's what happened. As I spoke the word, I felt a physical sensation in my body. It started in my throat, moved down into my chest, and spread into my abdomen. It felt like something was loosening, like internal chains I didn't know I was wearing suddenly unlocked and fell away. I took a deep breath and realized I could breathe deeper than I had in years. Nothing changed externally in that moment. No money appeared. No phone calls came through. But something fundamental shifted internally, and that internal shift set off a chain reaction that altered my entire external reality within days. The client who'd ghosted me suddenly emailed to apologize and said they wanted to move forward. A debt I'd been struggling to pay was unexpectedly forgiven due to an administrative error. An old friend reached out with a business opportunity I never would have pursued on my own, and it became my most profitable venture that year. None of this was coincidence. It was the direct result of speaking the language of opening over a system that had been locked down. Here's what you need to understand about seals. They're not always placed by you. Sometimes they're inherited. Generational poverty creates energetic patterns that get passed down through family lines, like genetic code. If your grandparents survived the Depression by hoarding and fearing scarcity, that frequency is in your DNA. If your parents fought about money constantly, you absorbed the belief that financial resources create conflict, and your subconscious sealed off your abundance to protect your relationships. If you grew up in a religious environment that taught you money is evil or that suffering is noble, your spirit closed itself off from prosperity to stay aligned with what you were told was holy. These seals aren't your fault, but they are your responsibility to break. EFATÁ breaks them. Not gradually, not gently, violently, the same way Jesus sighed deeply before speaking the word because he knew what he was about to do required force. He wasn't politely asking the man's ears to consider opening. He was commanding a sealed condition to surrender to divine authority. And that's exactly what you're doing when you speak EFATÁ over your financial reality. You're not negotiating with your blockages. You're not trying to understand them or heal them slowly over time through years of therapy. You're issuing a command that they no longer have permission to exist. You're exercising spiritual authority that doesn't ask for cooperation. It demands obedience. This is where most manifestation teachings fail you. They tell you to be positive, to affirm abundance, to visualize wealth, but they never address the fact that you're trying to pour water into a clenched fist. You can't receive what you're not open to hold. And openness isn't achieved through mental tricks or emotional bypassing. It's achieved through direct confrontation with whatever has sealed you shut. EFATÁ is that confrontation. It's the moment you stop trying to work around your blockages and start demolishing them. It's the moment you stop being a victim of your closed condition and become the authority that commands it to break. And when that shift happens, when you stop asking and start commanding, reality has no choice but to rearrange itself around your new frequency. Let me give you the practical reality of what this looks like. After I experienced that first opening in the parking lot, I committed to a daily practice. Every morning before I did anything else, I would sit in silence and scan my body for areas that felt tight, restricted, or heavy. Those sensations were indicators of closed channels. Then I would place my hand over that area and speak EFATÁ directly to it. Sometimes it was my throat, where I'd been holding back my voice in business negotiations. Sometimes it was my solar plexus, where fear had been collapsing my confidence. Sometimes it was my lower abdomen, where ancestral poverty had been stored for generations. Each time I spoke the word, I felt the area soften, expand, release. And each time a channel opened internally, something shifted externally within hours or days. One morning I felt a massive blockage in my chest, right over my heart. It was so heavy I could barely breathe. I placed both hands there and I spoke EFATÁ with more force than I'd ever used before. I felt something crack inside me and I started crying, not sad tears, release tears. Tears that had been dammed up for years behind the belief that I wasn't allowed to want wealth, that desiring financial freedom made me greedy or shallow or unspiritual. That seal had been choking my abundance for my entire adult life, and in that moment, it shattered. 3 days later, I received a contract offer worth more than I'd made in the previous 6 months combined. The opportunity had always been there. I just hadn't been open enough to receive it until that seal broke. This is what EFATÁ does. It doesn't bring you something new. It opens you to what's already been waiting. And the more you practice it, the more you realize that your abundance was never missing. It was just stuck behind doors you didn't know how to unlock. Now you have the key. Now you know the word. Now you understand that every closed condition in your life, whether it's financial, relational, creative, or spiritual, is subject to the same command: be opened. And when you speak that command with the full weight of your spiritual authority, with the understanding that you're not begging but commanding, those seals don't stand a chance. They break, they dissolve, they surrender. And everything they've been holding back comes flooding into your reality with the force of a dam that's finally burst. Sound is not passive. It's not decoration. Sound is creative force. Before anything existed in the physical realm, there was sound. In the beginning was the word, not the thought, not the intention, but the word, spoken, vibrated, released into the formless void with enough power to organize chaos into cosmos. Every ancient tradition understood this. The Egyptians knew that certain tones could move massive stones. The Tibetan monks used specific frequencies to alter consciousness. The Hebrews recognized that the name of God, when spoken correctly, could part seas and crumble walls. EFATÁ belongs to this lineage of sounds that don't describe reality. They reshape it. And when you understand how to use your voice as an instrument of creation, you stop being a beggar in your own life and become an architect. Let me break down what happens when you speak EFATÁ at the vibrational level. Every word carries a frequency signature. Most of the words you speak daily are low vibration, unconscious noise, complaints about traffic, gossip about co-workers, worried predictions about bills you can't pay. These sounds don't just express your current state, they reinforce it. They build energetic structures around you that lock you into the reality you're describing. But EFATÁ operates at a completely different frequency. It's a command tone. It doesn't match your current reality. It disrupts it. When you speak this word with intention, you're introducing a frequency into your field that's incompatible with closure, blockage, and limitation. Your entire energetic system has to reorganize itself around this new vibration. I'll never forget the first time I truly felt this. I was practicing EFATÁ in my living room, speaking it out loud over my financial situation. I'd done this several times before, but this particular morning felt different. I closed my eyes and I spoke the word slowly, letting each syllable resonate in my chest. E-fa-ta. As I did, I became aware of something I can only describe as a hum. Not an external sound, an internal vibration. It started low, almost imperceptible, then built in intensity until my entire body felt like it was buzzing. My hands started tingling, my heart rate increased, and then I felt a wave of heat move through me, starting at the crown of my head and cascading down through my torso. It wasn't uncomfortable, it was activating, like my cells were waking up from a long sleep. What I experienced in that moment was the actual physics of opening. Sound waves are measurable. They move through matter. They create patterns. When you speak EFATÁ, you're not just making noise. You're generating a specific waveform that travels through your body, through your energy field, and into the quantum fabric of your reality. That waveform carries information. It carries the command to open. And because everything in existence is vibration, from the atoms in your body to the opportunities waiting to manifest in your life, that command gets received. Not metaphorically, literally. Your closed channels receive the signal to expand. Your contracted energy receives the instruction to release. Your sealed abundance receives the authorization to flow. But here's the critical piece most people miss. The power of EFATÁ isn't just in the word itself, it's in the authority behind the word. You could say EFATÁ 1,000 times with doubt in your heart, and nothing would shift. Why? Because you're not speaking from the place of power. You're speaking from the place of hoping, wishing, trying, and hope is a low-frequency vibration. It's the frequency of lack pretending to be faith. True authority doesn't hope. It knows, it commands, it expects obedience. When Jesus spoke EFATÁ, he didn't wonder if it would work. He didn't cross his fingers and hope the man's ears might possibly open if the universe was in a good mood. He spoke as someone who understood that his words carried creative force, and reality had no option but to comply. You have that same authority. You've just been conditioned to forget it. Society trains you to be polite with your desires. Religion trains you to be humble about your worthiness. The economy trains you to accept scarcity as normal. And all of that conditioning creates a voice inside you that whispers, "Who are you to command anything? Who are you to speak with authority? You're just trying to survive like everyone else." That voice is the seal. That voice is the blockage. And the moment you recognize it for what it is, a program designed to keep you small and compliant, you can override it. You override it by speaking EFATÁ, not from your wounded self, but from your sovereign self. The part of you that was created in the image of the divine. The part of you that has always carried creative power, whether you've been using it or not. I started experimenting with this. Instead of speaking EFATÁ from my throat, which is where most people speak from, I began speaking it from my core. I would drop my awareness into my belly, the seat of personal power in almost every spiritual tradition, and I would let the word rise from there. The difference was staggering. When I spoke from my throat, the word felt hollow, performative, but when I spoke from my core, I could feel the vibration anchor in my body before it moved outward. It had weight, it had density, it had authority, and the results reflected that shift. Opportunities that had been stuck for months suddenly moved forward within days. People who'd been ignoring my emails suddenly responded with enthusiasm. Resources I'd been scraping for suddenly appeared with ease. This is what I mean when I say sound reshapes reality. You're not reciting an incantation. You're issuing a directive from the authority center of your being, and that directive carries vibrational information that reorganizes the energy field around you. Think of it like a tuning fork. When you strike a tuning fork calibrated to a specific frequency, every other object in the room that's capable of vibrating at that frequency starts to resonate in harmony. EFATÁ is your tuning fork. It's calibrated to the frequency of opening. And when you strike it with authority, every closed door, every blocked channel, every sealed opportunity in your field starts to vibrate at that same frequency. They can't help it. It's physics, and physics doesn't care about your worthiness story or your past failures. It simply responds to the vibration you're generating. Now let me show you how to amplify this even further. Sound doesn't exist in isolation. It's enhanced by breath, by intention, and by repetition. The breath is the carrier wave, intention is the direction, repetition is the reinforcement. When you combine all three, you create a vibrational pattern so strong that it can shatter seals you didn't even know existed. Here's the protocol I developed. I take a deep breath, filling my lungs completely. I hold that breath for a count of 4, allowing the oxygen to saturate my cells. Then I release the breath while speaking EFATÁ, putting the full force of that exhale behind the word. I do this 3 times. 3 is the number of completion, of manifestation, of bringing something from the spiritual realm into the physical. By the 3rd repetition, I can feel the shift happening. The first time you do this, you might not feel anything dramatic. That's normal. Your system isn't used to operating at this frequency. You've been running on the lower vibrations of doubt, fear, and resignation for so long that your energetic channels are atrophied. But the more you practice, the more those channels open and strengthen. It's like going to the gym. The first day you lift weights, you're weak and sore, but if you keep showing up, your muscles adapt, they grow. They become capable of handling heavier loads. Your voice works the same way. The more you use it to command reality instead of complain about it, the more powerful it becomes. And EFATÁ is the weight you're lifting. Every time you speak it with authority, you're training your energetic system to operate at a higher, more expansive frequency. Let me give you a specific example of how this played out in my life. I had a client who owed me a significant amount of money. The project was completed months prior, but payment kept getting delayed. Excuses, promises, more delays. I'd sent polite follow-up emails. I'd made phone calls. Nothing worked. The money just wouldn't flow. I was frustrated, angry, and starting to resign myself to the loss. Then I remembered EFATÁ. Instead of sending another email, I sat down in my office, placed my hand over my solar plexus, where I could feel the knot of frustration, and I spoke EFATÁ 3 times with full breath and full authority. I said, "Every channel between me and the financial resources I've earned is now commanded to open. EFATÁ, EFATÁ, EFATÁ." I felt the knot in my stomach release. It was immediate and undeniable. Something that had been clenched tight for weeks suddenly relaxed. I didn't think about it again. I didn't obsess. I didn't send more emails. I just trusted that the command had been issued and reality would comply. 2 days later, I received a message from the client apologizing profusely and saying the payment had been processed and I should see it within 24 hours. The money arrived exactly as stated. Now, you could argue that was coincidence. You could say the payment was already in process and my EFATÁ practice had nothing to do with it. But I've seen this pattern repeat too many times to dismiss it. The frequency of opening creates pathways for flow. And when you speak that frequency with authority, the universe rearranges itself to honor the command. This is the power you're stepping into, not the power to manipulate or control external circumstances through force, but the power to align your vibration with the frequency of flow and let everything that's been blocked naturally release. EFATÁ is your sonic key. Your voice is the instrument, and your authority is the force that makes it all work. The more you practice, the more you'll realize that you've been living in a world of closed doors, not because they were locked from the outside, but because you never learned the sound that opens them from within. Now you know that sound. Now you understand its vibrational mechanics. And in the next chapter, I'm going to show you exactly what's been keeping those doors sealed in the first place, because you can't fully open what you don't understand has been closed. There's a reason your abundance has been stuck. It's not random. It's not punishment. And it's definitely not because you're unworthy or because the universe has favorites and you're not one of them. Your financial flow has been blocked by specific identifiable seals that were placed at specific moments in your life, and most of them were installed before you were old enough to consent. These seals don't announce themselves. They operate silently in the background of your consciousness, creating invisible walls between you and the prosperity that's trying to reach you. And until you identify them, until you call them out by name and break them with precision, you'll keep experiencing the same pattern. Effort without results, vision without manifestation, potential without fulfillment. The first seal is the worthiness wound. This is the deepest and most devastating blockage because it convinces you that you don't deserve to receive. It usually gets implanted in childhood, often by well-meaning parents or authority figures who had their own unhealed relationship with money. Maybe you heard phrases like, "Money doesn't grow on trees," or "We can't afford that," or "Rich people are greedy." Every time you heard those statements, they weren't just information, they were energetic imprints. Your young, impressionable nervous system absorbed them as truth. And over time, those truths calcified into a belief system that said, abundance is scarce, hard to obtain, and probably not meant for people like you. That belief created a seal over your receiver. Even now, as an adult who intellectually knows better, that childhood programming is still running in the background, sabotaging every attempt you make to expand financially. I lived with this seal for 30 years before I even recognized it. On the surface, I was ambitious. I set goals. I worked hard. I tried to build wealth. But underneath all that effort was a quiet, constant voice that said, "This won't work for you. Good things happen to other people. You're going to end up struggling just like your parents did." That voice wasn't loud. It didn't scream. It whispered. And whispers are dangerous because they sound like your own thoughts. You don't question them. You just accept them as reality. Every time I got close to a financial breakthrough, that whisper would activate and I'd unconsciously sabotage myself. I'd miss an important deadline. I'd undercharge for my services. I'd say yes to opportunities that drained me and no to opportunities that could have elevated me. I wasn't doing this on purpose. I was doing it because my worthiness seal was doing exactly what it was designed to do. Keep me small, keep me safe, keep me from expanding beyond what my childhood programming deemed acceptable. The second seal is the safety mechanism. Your subconscious mind's primary job is to keep you alive, not to make you wealthy. And somewhere along the way, your nervous system decided that financial expansion equals danger. Maybe you watched your parents fight viciously about money, and your little kid brain concluded that having more resources creates conflict and pain. So your system sealed off abundance to protect your relationships. Or maybe you witnessed someone in your family lose everything in a business failure or economic collapse, and your nervous system encoded the message that financial risk leads to devastation. So it sealed off your capacity to take the necessary risks that wealth requires. Or maybe you grew up in a community where standing out was punished, where success made you a target, and your system learned that visibility equals vulnerability. So it sealed off your ability to be seen, to promote yourself, to claim your value publicly. These safety seals are incredibly stubborn because they're not logical. You can't talk yourself out of them with affirmations. You can't think your way past them with positive mindset work. They're stored in your body, in your nervous system, below the level of conscious thought. I discovered my safety seal during a breakthrough moment in my business. I'd been offered a partnership that would have tripled my income and significantly expanded my influence. It was everything I said I wanted, but the moment I was about to sign the contract, I had a full-blown panic attack, heart racing, chest tight, couldn't breathe. I had to excuse myself from the meeting. I sat in my car, confused and furious with myself. Why was my body betraying me at the exact moment I was about to step into abundance? Then I closed my eyes and I asked my body directly, "What are you afraid of?" And I got an answer, not in words, in a memory. I was 7 years old watching my father celebrate a promotion at work. He was happy, excited, talking about all the things we'd finally be able to afford. 2 weeks later, the company restructured and he lost his job entirely. I watched him crumble. I watched my mother cry. I watched our family spiral into chaos. And in that moment, my 7-year-old nervous system made a decision. Success is temporary and leads to devastation. Better to stay small and stable than to reach high and fall hard. That seal had been running my financial life for decades without my conscious awareness. Once I saw it, once I understood where it came from, I could finally address it. I placed my hand over my heart and I spoke EFATÁ directly to that 7-year-old part of me that was still terrified of expansion. I said, "You are safe. Success does not equal loss. I am not my father. EFATÁ, be opened. The third seal is the generational curse. This one runs deeper than your personal history. It's woven into your family lineage. If you come from a line of people who struggled financially, who believed that poverty was noble or that suffering built character, that frequency is in your DNA. Epigenetics has proven that trauma, stress, and survival patterns get passed down through generations. Your grandmother's fear of the depression didn't die with her. It got encoded in her cells, passed to your mother, and inherited by you. You didn't consciously choose to carry that fear, but you're carrying it nonetheless. And that generational seal creates a ceiling over your abundance that feels impossible to break, because it's not just your belief. It's the collective belief of everyone who came before you. I come from a long line of hard-working, noble, perpetually broke people. Farmers, laborers, folks who believed that an honest day's work was its own reward and that wanting more than survival was somehow sinful or shameful. That programming was so deep in me that even when I started making good money, I couldn't keep it. I'd earn it and then immediately find ways to give it away, spend it on others, or lose it to unexpected expenses. My income would rise, but my net worth stayed flat. It took me years to realize I was operating under a generational agreement that said, we don't accumulate wealth in this family. We work hard, we survive, and we stay humble. That agreement was a seal, and it required more than personal healing. It required me to consciously sever that energetic contract with my lineage. The fourth seal is the spiritual confusion. This one is particularly insidious because it disguises itself as righteousness. If you were raised in certain religious environments, you were taught that money is the root of all evil, that it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter heaven, that God blesses the poor and suspects the wealthy. These teachings created a seal that says you have to choose between spiritual integrity and financial abundance. You can't have both. So your system shuts down your prosperity to protect your soul. You unconsciously repel money because you've been programmed to believe that accumulating it makes you less holy, less humble, less favored by the divine. I wrestled with this seal for years. Every time I made progress financially, I'd feel guilty. I'd hear the voices of pastors and Sunday school teachers warning me about the dangers of loving money. I'd feel like I was betraying my faith by wanting to live comfortably. It wasn't until I studied the actual scriptures, not the twisted interpretations, that I realized the truth. The Bible doesn't condemn wealth. It condemns the love of money, the worship of it, the hoarding of it at the expense of compassion. But wealth itself, it's a tool, it's a resource. It's energy that can be used for tremendous good or tremendous harm, depending on the hands that hold it. Once I understood that distinction, I could finally speak EFATÁ over the spiritual seal and say, my prosperity does not separate me from the divine. My abundance allows me to serve at a higher level. EFATÁ, be opened. The fifth seal is the identity lock. This is the seal that keeps you trapped in the story of who you've always been. You've defined yourself by your struggle. You introduce yourself with your limitations. I'm not good with money. I'm just not a business person. I've always been broke. Financial success isn't in my DNA. Every time you speak those identity statements, you reinforce the seal. You tell the universe, this is who I am, and I'm not available to be anyone different. And the universe, which always honors your declarations, says, okay, we'll keep sending you experiences that match that identity. The seal stays in place not because it's true, but because you keep claiming it as truth. Breaking the identity seal requires you to become someone you've never been before, and that terrifies most people. There's a strange comfort in familiar suffering. You know how to be broke. You know how to struggle. You've built an entire personality around being the underdog, the one who perseveres despite the odds. But who are you without that story? Who are you if money flows easily? Who are you if you're not constantly fighting for survival? That unknown is scarier than the known pain, so your system keeps the seal in place to protect you from the discomfort of transformation. EFATÁ breaks that seal by giving you permission to become unrecognizable to your former self. It says, the person you were is not the person you're becoming. And that's not just okay, it's necessary. These 5 seals, the worthiness wound, the safety mechanism, the generational curse, the spiritual confusion, and the identity lock, are the primary blockages keeping your abundance sealed off. You might have all 5, you might have 3, but I guarantee you have at least 1, probably more, and here's what you need to understand. You can't heal these seals slowly over time through gentle inner work and journaling prompts. They require demolition. They require the vibrational force of EFATÁ, spoken with authority directly over each one. In the next chapter, I'm going to give you the exact protocol for identifying which seals are active in your life and how to shatter them systematically so that nothing stands between you and the flood of abundance that's been waiting to pour into your reality. Now we move from understanding to application. Everything you've learned up to this point has been foundation, framework, diagnosis. But knowledge without action is just intellectual entertainment. You can understand EFATÁ perfectly and still stay broke if you never actually use it. So this chapter is where theory becomes practice, where information becomes transformation, where you learn the exact protocol for speaking EFATÁ over the specific deserts in your financial life and commanding them to bloom. This isn't complicated. It doesn't require years of spiritual training or special gifts. It requires precision, authority, and consistency, 3 elements that most people abandon the moment results don't appear instantly. But you're not most people. You're someone who's ready to wield this ancient key with the seriousness it deserves. The first step is identification. You can't open what you haven't named. Sit down with a journal or a blank document and write out every area of your financial life where flow has stopped. Be brutally specific. Don't write vague statements like, I need more money. That's too general. Your subconscious doesn't know what to do with that. Instead, write statements like, my income has been stuck at the same level for 3 years, despite increasing my skills and effort. Or, I attract clients who waste my time but never convert to paying customers. Or, every time I save money, an unexpected expense appears and drains the account. These are specific desserts, specific sealed channels, and each one requires a targeted application of EFATÁ. When I first did this exercise, I identified 7 distinct deserts in my financial landscape. My income ceiling that wouldn't break past a certain threshold, no matter what I tried. My inability to charge premium prices without feeling guilty. My pattern of attracting people who wanted free advice but never hired me. My tendency to over-deliver and undercharge. My fear of visibility that kept me from marketing myself effectively. My resistance to asking for help or investment. My belief that if I made too much money, people would judge me or relationships would suffer. 7 seals, 7 specific blockages. And I knew that trying to address all of them at once would dilute my focus. So I prioritized them. I started with the seal that was causing me the most immediate pain, which was my income ceiling. Here's the protocol I used and the one I'm giving you now. Choose one desert, just one. The one that's causing you the most frustration or limitation right now. Clear your space, turn off your phone, sit somewhere you won't be interrupted. Close your eyes and bring that specific financial desert into your awareness. Don't just think about it, feel it. Feel the frustration of earning the same amount month after month while your expenses keep rising. Feel the humiliation of having to decline opportunities because you can't afford them. Feel the exhaustion of working so hard for results that never seem to multiply. Let yourself feel the full weight of that closed condition. This isn't wallowing. This is locating the exact seal you're about to break. Once you've located it, place your hand over the part of your body where you feel that blockage most intensely. For me, income ceilings always showed up as tightness in my throat. That's where I was holding back my voice, my value, my right to ask for what I was worth. For you, it might be different. It might be your chest, your stomach, your lower back. Your body knows where the seal is stored. Trust the first place your hand wants to go. Then take a deep breath, filling your lungs completely. Hold that breath for a count of 4. And as you exhale, speak EFATÁ directly to that sealed area with every ounce of authority you can summon. Not hope, not wishful thinking. Command. Say it like you mean it. EFATÁ. This income ceiling is broken. This channel is opened. Flow is restored. The first time you do this, you might feel silly. You might feel like you're performing a ritual that has no basis in reality. Your rational mind will try to convince you that speaking an Aramaic word over your invisible energy field is absurd and childish. Ignore that voice. That's the seal defending itself. That's the blockage trying to convince you to stay comfortable in your familiar limitation. Push through the discomfort. Speak EFATÁ 3 times over that desert, 3 times with full breath, 3 times with full conviction, and then sit in silence and notice what happens in your body. You might feel heat, you might feel tingling, you might feel an emotional release, tears or laughter or anger. You might feel nothing at all. None of that matters. What matters is that you issued the command. The energetic shift has been initiated whether you feel it immediately or not. Now here's the critical piece that most people miss. Speaking EFATÁ once is powerful, but it's not enough to shatter a seal that's been in place for decades. You're dealing with deeply entrenched patterns, generational programming, neurological pathways that have been reinforced thousands of times. One session of EFATÁ is like taking one swing at a concrete wall with a sledgehammer. You'll make a crack, but the wall is still standing. You need repeated impact. You need consistent application. So for the next 21 days, you're going to speak EFATÁ over that same desert every single morning before you do anything else. 21 days is the minimum time required to begin rewiring a neural pathway. Some seals will break faster, some will take longer, but 21 days of focused, authoritative EFATÁ practice will create undeniable shifts in your external reality. I committed to this protocol with my income ceiling. Every morning for 3 weeks, I sat in the same chair, placed my hand over my throat, and I spoke EFATÁ with increasing force and clarity. The first few days felt mechanical. I was going through the motions without much emotional connection. But around day 5, something shifted. I started to feel angry, furious actually. Angry at all the years I'd accepted less than I was worth. Angry at all the times I'd shrunk myself to make others comfortable. Angry at every person who'd benefited from my expertise without compensating me fairly. That anger wasn't destructive, it was fuel. It gave my EFATÁ practice an edge, a fierceness that cut through the seal faster than polite spirituality ever could. By day 10, the external shifts started appearing. A former client reached out asking if I had availability for a new project, and when I quoted my rate, which was 50% higher than what I used to charge, they agreed without negotiation. That had never happened before. I'd always had to justify my prices, offer discounts, convince people of my value. But this time, the conversation was effortless. The client simply said yes. 2 days later, another opportunity appeared, this one even more lucrative, and then another. Within 3 weeks of consistent EFATÁ practice, my income had increased by 40%. Not because I was working harder or smarter, because the seal had cracked and flow was finally able to reach me. But let me be clear about something. EFATÁ is not a magic spell that bypasses action. It's a key that opens doors, but you still have to walk through them. After speaking EFATÁ over my income ceiling, I had to actually raise my rates. I had to have uncomfortable conversations. I had to say no to low-paying opportunities that my old self would have accepted out of desperation. The difference was that those actions felt natural instead of terrifying. The seal had been blocking my courage, my clarity, my ability to see my own value. Once it broke, the actions that used to paralyze me became obvious next steps. EFATÁ doesn't do the work for you. It removes the internal resistance so you can do the work without sabotaging yourself. After you've worked with one desert for 21 days and seen evidence of opening, you move to the next seal on your list. Don't try to rush this process by working on multiple deserts simultaneously. That scatters your energy and dilutes your results, one seal at a time, one focused application of EFATÁ until that channel opens and flow is restored. Then you move to the next. This is how you systematically dismantle every blockage between you and total financial freedom. It's not glamorous, it's not fast, but it's effective in ways that no amount of vision boards or positive affirmations will ever be, because you're working at the level of energetic structure, not surface-level wishful thinking. Let me give you another practical example. After my income ceiling broke, I turned my attention to my visibility seal. I'd been hiding for years, afraid to put myself out there, afraid of judgment and criticism. That seal was stored in my solar plexus, the center of personal power and confidence. Every morning for 21 days, I placed my hand there and I spoke EFATÁ over my fear of being seen. I commanded that seal to break. I declared that my voice mattered, that my message deserved to be heard, that visibility was safe. And slowly, incrementally, I started taking actions I'd been avoiding for years. I posted content online without obsessing over perfection. I pitched myself for speaking opportunities. I showed up on video even though I hated how I looked on camera. None of it felt comfortable, but the seal had cracked enough that discomfort no longer stopped me. Within a month, I was invited to speak at an event that connected me with 3 clients who became long-term contracts worth more than I'd made the entire previous year. That opportunity didn't fall from the sky. It came because I'd broken the visibility seal and allowed myself to be seen. EFATÁ created the opening. My willingness to act created the result. This is the partnership between spiritual authority and practical responsibility. You command the blockage to break, then you step into the space that opens as a result. And every time you do this, every time you speak EFATÁ over a desert and then take aligned action, you're training your entire system to operate at a higher frequency of trust, courage, and receptivity. Here's what I want you to understand as you begin this practice. You will encounter resistance. Your ego, your fear, your old identity will fight to keep the seals in place because they've been your protection, your excuse, your reason for staying small. When that resistance shows up, when the voice in your head says, this is stupid or pointless or not working, that's not truth. That's the seal defending itself. And your job in that moment is to speak EFATÁ with even more authority, to push through the discomfort, to refuse to negotiate with the blockage. You are not asking permission. You are issuing a command, and commands don't require the cooperation of what they're commanding. They require obedience. So take your journal, identify your deserts, choose one, and starting tomorrow morning, speak EFATÁ over it for 21 consecutive days. Don't skip a day. Don't half commit. This is not casual spiritual experimentation. This is precision demolition of the energetic structures that have been imprisoning your abundance. And in the next chapter, I'm going to show you exactly what happens inside your field when those seals begin to crack. Because once you understand the mechanics of energetic expansion, you'll never doubt this process again. You'll know, in your body and in your results, that EFATÁ is not theory. It's power. And you're learning to wield it. There's a moment in every opening where you can actually feel it happening, not metaphorically, not symbolically, physically. Your energy field, which has been compressed and contracted around limitation for years, begins to expand. It's like being in a room with walls that suddenly start moving outward, creating space where there was none before. Most people miss this moment because they're looking for external validation. They're checking their bank account, refreshing their email, waiting for proof that something has changed. But the shift happens internally first. Always. Your external reality is just a delayed reflection of your internal energetic state. And when you learn to recognize the sensations of expansion as they occur inside your body, you gain access to real-time feedback about whether your EFATÁ practice is working. You stop relying on hope and start operating from knowing. The first sensation of expansion is usually breath. After speaking EFATÁ consistently for several days, you'll notice you can breathe deeper than before. It's subtle at first. You might take a breath and realize you can pull air further down into your belly than usual. Your chest opens wider, your ribs expand more fully. This isn't random. Breath is directly connected to your capacity to receive. When you're operating from a closed, contracted state, your breathing becomes shallow. You're literally taking in less life force, less oxygen, less energetic nourishment. But as the seals begin to crack, as EFATÁ starts doing its work, your respiratory system responds. It opens. It allows more in. And that increased breath capacity translates directly into increased financial capacity because they operate on the same principle. How much can you hold? How much can you receive without collapsing back into contraction? I remember the morning I first noticed this shift. I was sitting in meditation after my daily EFATÁ practice, and I took what I thought would be a normal breath. But it kept going, deeper and deeper into my torso, filling spaces that had felt blocked for as long as I could remember. I exhaled completely, then inhaled again, and the same thing happened. Fuller, wider, easier. I actually started laughing because I realized I'd been breathing like a person who was trying not to take up too much space, trying not to need too much, trying not to be too much. And in that moment, my body was showing me that the seal of smallness had cracked. I could take up space now. I could need more. I could be more. And that permission, registered first in my breath, began showing up in my finances within days. The second sensation is spaciousness in your chest. This is where most people store their emotional blockages, their grief, their unworthiness, their fear of receiving love and abundance. If you've been carrying financial anxiety for years, it's probably lodged in your chest as a constant low-grade tightness. You might not even notice it anymore because it's become your baseline. But after consistent EFATÁ practice, that tightness begins to dissolve. You'll feel it one morning as you're getting dressed or driving to work. A sudden sense of openness in your heart center, like someone removed a heavy plate that had been pressing down on your sternum. This spaciousness isn't just pleasant, it's functional. It's creating room for abundance to land. You can't receive what you have no space to hold. I experienced this while working on my worthiness seal. For weeks, I'd been speaking EFATÁ over the belief that I didn't deserve financial ease, that I had to struggle and suffer to earn my worth. One morning, as I was speaking the word for probably the 50th time, I felt something crack in the center of my chest. It wasn't painful. It was a release, like a knot suddenly untying itself. And in the space where that knot had been, I felt air, lightness, openness. I put my hand over my heart and I could feel it beating stronger, clearer, less burdened. That same day, I received an email from someone offering to pay me for work I'd done months ago as a favor. I hadn't asked for compensation. I'd written it off as a gift. But this person felt compelled to honor the value I'd provided. That money showed up because the seal of unworthiness had cracked and I was finally able to receive without guilt. The third sensation is heat. When seals break, energy that's been dammed up suddenly starts moving, and movement creates friction, which creates heat. You might feel this as warmth spreading through your hands, your face, your core. It can be intense, almost uncomfortable, like a hot flash that comes out of nowhere. Don't be alarmed. This is your system recalibrating. It's shifting from a cold, contracted, survival-based frequency to a warm, expansive, thriving-based frequency. The heat is proof that circulation has been restored. Energy that was stagnant is now flowing, and flowing energy is magnetic. It attracts opportunities, resources, people, and circumstances that match its frequency. I felt this heat most powerfully when I was breaking my generational poverty seal. That one ran deep, embedded in my cells through decades of family programming. I'd been speaking EFATÁ over it for 2 weeks, when one night lying in bed, I suddenly felt an intense wave of heat move through my entire body. It started at my feet and rolled up through my legs, my torso, my arms, and out through the crown of my head. I was sweating. My heart was racing. For a moment I thought I was sick. But then I realized what was happening. The seal was shattering. Generations of lack consciousness were being incinerated by the frequency I'd been consistently applying. I didn't sleep much that night. My body was too active, too alive, too busy reorganizing itself around this new frequency of abundance. The next morning, I received a phone call from a relative I hadn't spoken to in years. She was calling to tell me that an elderly aunt had passed away and left me a small inheritance. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was significant, and more importantly, it was symbolic. My family lineage, which had only ever passed down struggle and scarcity, was now passing down resources. The generational curse had broken, the seal had cracked, and the evidence showed up in the physical world within hours of the energetic shift. This is how it works. Internal expansion creates external evidence. Not eventually, quickly, sometimes immediately. The fourth sensation is tingling or vibration. This usually happens in your hands, your feet, or along your spine. It feels like electricity running through your nervous system. What's actually occurring is that your energetic channels, your nadis or meridians, depending on which tradition you reference, are opening and clearing. They've been clogged with fear, doubt, and old programming. EFATÁ is flushing them clean. And as they clear, energy flows through them more freely, creating that electric, tingly sensation. When you feel this, you're feeling your abundance channels coming back online. You're feeling your capacity to circulate wealth increasing in real time. I started feeling this tingling in my hands during my 3rd week of EFATÁ practice. At first, it only happened during the actual practice while I was speaking the word. But after a few more days, it started happening randomly throughout the day. I'd be typing an email and suddenly my fingertips would start buzzing. I'd be on a phone call and my palms would heat up and tingle. I learned to recognize this as a signal that an abundance opportunity was present. My energetic system was alerting me before my conscious mind could catch up. And sure enough, almost every time I felt that tingling, something financially significant would follow within hours or days. A client inquiry, a payment that was overdue, an idea that would generate revenue. My body had become an antenna for prosperity, and the tingling was the signal that transmission was occurring. The 5th sensation is emotional release. As the seals break, all the grief, anger, shame, and fear that's been trapped behind them comes flooding out. You might find yourself crying for no apparent reason, or feeling rage at people and situations from your past, or experiencing waves of sadness about all the years you spent in limitation. This isn't regression. This is purging. You can't fill a vessel that's already full of old, stagnant emotional sludge. EFATÁ creates the opening, and then everything that's been blocking the channel has to move out to make room for what's trying to move in. Let it flow. Don't suppress it. Don't judge it. Don't try to make it mean something's wrong. It's evidence that something's right. The dam is breaking. The flood is coming. I had a massive emotional release during my work on the safety seal. I'd been speaking EFATÁ over my fear of financial expansion for about 10 days when I was driving home from a meeting and a song came on the radio. It wasn't even a sad song, but something about it triggered a memory of my father's face when he lost his job, and I started sobbing so hard I had to pull over. I cried for 20 minutes straight, releasing decades of fear that success would lead to loss, that visibility would make me a target, that having more would result in losing everything. When the tears finally stopped, I felt emptied out, hollow. And in that hollowness, there was space, clean, clear, open space. 2 days later, I signed the biggest contract of my career, the one I'd been too afraid to pursue. The emotional release cleared the channel. The contract filled it. Here's what you need to understand about these sensations. They're not side effects. They're the main event. Your body is showing you, in language that transcends words, that transformation is occurring at the deepest levels of your being. Most people ignore these signals because they've been trained to prioritize external validation over internal knowing. They want to see the money before they believe the opening has happened, but that's backward. The money is the last thing to show up, not the first. First comes the breath, then the spaciousness, then the heat, then the tingling, then the emotional release. And finally, after all of that internal reorganization has occurred, the external reality rearranges itself to match your new energetic structure. So as you continue your EFATÁ practice, pay attention to what's happening in your body. Notice when your breath deepens. Notice when your chest feels lighter. Notice when heat moves through you. Notice when your hands start tingling. Notice when emotions you've been suppressing for years suddenly demand to be felt and released. These are not random experiences. They're proof that the seals are cracking, that your channels are widening, that your capacity to receive is expanding beyond anything you've known before. And in the next chapter, I'm going to show you what happens on the divine side of this equation, because EFATÁ isn't just you doing something to yourself. It's you activating a response from the universe itself. When you speak with authority, heaven listens. And when heaven listens, everything changes. There's a cosmic mechanism most people never activate because they don't understand their role in the conversation with the divine. They pray, they ask, they beg, they negotiate, but they never command. And because they never command, they never trigger the response that's reserved for those who speak with spiritual authority. EFATÁ isn't a prayer request. It's not a humble petition whispered from a place of lack, hoping God might notice and maybe, if you're lucky, decide to help. EFATÁ is a declaration of partnership with the creative force of the universe. It's you stepping into the authority you were always meant to carry and speaking the language that heaven recognizes as legitimate. And when you speak that language correctly, with full conviction and zero apology, the divine response is immediate, specific, and undeniable. Let me explain how this works. The universe operates on frequencies, on vibrational agreements. When you speak from the frequency of lack, desperation, or unworthiness, you're broadcasting a signal that says, I am separate from abundance. I am outside the flow. I need someone or something external to save me. And the universe, which is a perfect mirror, reflects that signal back to you as continued lack, continued separation, continued struggle. But when you speak EFATÁ from the frequency of authority, you're broadcasting an entirely different signal. You're saying, I am an expression of the divine. I carry creative power. I am not asking for permission to access abundance. I am commanding the channels to open because that is my birthright. And that signal activates a response mechanism in the fabric of reality itself. The first response you'll notice is synchronicity. Events that seem too perfectly timed to be coincidence start occurring with increasing frequency. You think about a person you haven't talked to in months, and they call you that same day with an opportunity. You need a specific resource, and someone mentions exactly that resource in a conversation you weren't even planning to have. You're struggling with a problem, and the solution appears through a random article, an overheard conversation, an unexpected encounter. These aren't accidents. They're the universe reorganizing itself around your new frequency. When you speak EFATÁ with authority, you become a magnet for aligned circumstances. The divine intelligence that orchestrates all things begins moving pieces into position to support your expansion. I experienced this so dramatically after my first month of EFATÁ practice that I couldn't dismiss it as coincidence, even if I wanted to. I'd been working on a project that required a specific skill set I didn't have and couldn't afford to hire. I'd been stressing about it for weeks, trying to figure out how to make it work with my limited resources. Then one morning during my EFATÁ practice, I spoke directly over that problem. I said, EFATÁ, the solution to this challenge is opened. The right person, the right resource, the right path is revealed now. I didn't obsess about it afterward. I just trusted that the command had been issued and the response would follow. That afternoon, I went to a coffee shop I rarely visit. While standing in line, the person in front of me was wearing a shirt with a logo I recognized from a company that specialized in exactly the skill I needed. I struck up a conversation. Turns out, this person had just left that company and was looking for freelance projects. We talked for 30 minutes. By the end of the conversation, they'd agreed to help me with my project at a rate I could afford, and they were excited about it because it aligned with work they actually wanted to be doing. Every single element of that encounter was synchronized perfectly. The timing, the location, the conversation, the mutual benefit. None of it was forced. It flowed. And that flow was the direct result of speaking EFATÁ over a sealed situation and allowing the divine response to orchestrate the solution. The second response is acceleration. Things that normally take months or years start happening in weeks or days. Doors that were previously locked don't just open, they swing wide with momentum. Opportunities that you thought would require extensive effort to pursue suddenly become effortless. This isn't because the universe is playing favorites. It's because you've removed the energetic resistance that was slowing everything down. When the seals are in place, every action you take has to fight through layers of internal blockage. You're pushing against doubt, fear, unworthiness, and old programming with every step. But when EFATÁ cracks those seals, the path clears, resistance dissolves, and everything you've been working toward starts moving at the speed it was always meant to move if you hadn't been blocking it. I saw this with a book project I'd been trying to complete for 2 years. I had the concept, I had the outline, I had half the content written, but every time I sat down to work on it, I'd hit a wall, writer's block, self-doubt, exhaustion. I'd manage a paragraph or two, then give up. I was starting to believe the project was cursed, or that I simply wasn't meant to finish it. Then I started my EFATÁ practice, and in the 3rd week, I spoke the word directly over my creative channel. I placed my hand over my throat and my heart, and I commanded the seal of creative blockage to shatter. I said, EFATÁ. My voice flows freely. My ideas move through me without obstruction. This book is completed with ease and excellence. Within 3 days, I sat down to write, and 4,000 words poured out of me in a single session. The next day, another 3,000. The ideas that had been stuck for months suddenly cascaded through me faster than I could type them. Within 2 weeks, the book was finished, not rushed, not forced. It flowed with a naturalness that felt almost supernatural. That's acceleration. That's what happens when the divine response meets your cleared channel. Everything that was waiting to come through you finally has permission and pathway to do so. And it doesn't trickle. It floods. The third response is provision. Resources you didn't even know you needed start appearing exactly when you need them. Money shows up from unexpected sources. People offer help without you asking. Solutions present themselves before you've fully articulated the problem. This is the universe demonstrating that when you align with the frequency of opening, you tap into an infinite supply system that's always been there but was previously inaccessible because of your seals. The divine doesn't withhold. It waits for you to create the capacity to receive. And the moment you do, through EFATÁ, provision flows to match your expansion. I experienced this in a profound way during a financial crisis. I had a tax bill due that I hadn't properly prepared for, and I was short by several $1,000s. I had no savings to pull from, no credit available, no obvious solution. My old pattern would have been to panic, to spiral into shame and fear, to scramble and stress myself into paralysis. But I'd been practicing EFATÁ for months by this point, and I'd seen enough evidence of divine response that I chose a different approach. I sat down, placed my hands over my solar plexus where I could feel the knot of financial anxiety, and I spoke EFATÁ with absolute authority. I said, EFATÁ, the resources to meet this obligation are opened and provided now. I receive without struggle. I trust the flow. I felt the knot release. I took a deep breath and went about my day without obsessing over the problem. 2 days later, I received an email from a platform where I'd published content years ago. They informed me that my work had generated royalties I didn't know existed, and a check was being mailed. The amount, almost exactly what I needed for the tax bill. Then, the next day, a former client reached out to pay an invoice they'd forgotten about from months prior. Between those two unexpected provisions, I had more than enough to cover the debt with room to spare. I didn't manifest that money through visualization or affirmations. I commanded the seal of financial lack to open, and the divine response delivered provision through channels I never could have orchestrated on my own. The fourth response is protection. As you begin to expand, as your abundance increases, you become a target for people and situations that want to drain your resources. But when you're operating under the divine response triggered by EFATÁ, you develop a kind of energetic immunity. Wrong opportunities don't stick. Toxic people lose interest in you. Situations that would have derailed you before simply dissolve before they can cause damage. This isn't you doing anything. It's the universe protecting the opening it created in response to your command. Heaven doesn't invest in your expansion just to let it be sabotaged by energy vampires and distractions. I noticed this protection when a business partnership opportunity came my way that looked incredible on paper. Great financials, impressive credentials, enthusiastic energy. Everything my logical mind said I should say yes to, but something in my gut felt off. Normally, I would have overridden that intuition with rational justification and moved forward anyway, terrified of missing out on a good opportunity. But I'd been in EFATÁ practice long enough that I'd learned to trust the signals my body was sending. So I paused. I sat with it. I spoke EFATÁ over the decision and asked for clarity. Within 24 hours, information surfaced about this potential partner that revealed they'd burned multiple people in previous ventures. Red flags I never would have discovered if I'd rushed into agreement. That's divine protection. That's the universe saying, you commanded opening and I responded by creating flow. Now I'm protecting that flow from anything that would corrupt or collapse it. This protection shows up in big ways and small ways. You miss a meeting that would have been a waste of time. You forget to send an email that would have led to a dead-end conversation. You lose interest in opportunities that your old self would have chased desperately. All of it is orchestrated to keep your energy focused on the channels that are truly aligned with your expansion. And you don't have to micromanage any of it. You just have to keep speaking EFATÁ and trust that the response includes not just provision, but protection. The fifth response is transformation of your identity. This is the deepest and most permanent effect of the divine response. When heaven hears your command and begins reorganizing reality around you, you can't stay the same person. The old you, with all its limitations and fears and small thinking, starts to dissolve. And a new you, one that's comfortable with abundance, confident in receiving, and grounded in spiritual authority, begins to emerge. This isn't something you force or fake. It's a natural byproduct of consistently operating at the frequency of EFATÁ. You become what you command. You embody the opening you've spoken into existence. I didn't recognize this transformation until someone who hadn't seen me in a year pointed it out. They said, "You're different. I can't put my finger on it, but something about you has completely changed. You seem taller, more solid, more certain." I wasn't taller, but I was more solid, more certain, because I'd spent months speaking EFATÁ over every seal in my life, and the cumulative effect was a complete rewiring of how I saw myself and how I moved through the world. I no longer identified as someone struggling to make ends meet. I no longer related to scarcity as my baseline. I'd become someone who expected flow, who trusted provision, who knew that abundance was my natural state. And that identity shift magnetized everything I'd been chasing for years. This is what happens when heaven hears your command. It doesn't just give you things, it transforms you into the kind of person who can receive, hold, and multiply those things without self-destructing. It upgrades your entire operating system from survival mode to thriving mode. And once that upgrade is complete, once you've fully stepped into your identity as an open vessel for divine abundance, there's no going back. You can't unknow what you now know. You can't unbecome what you've become. The seals are broken, the channels are open. And in the next chapter, I'm going to give you the practical, tangible steps for receiving everything that's about to pour into your life. Because opening the floodgates is one thing. Learning to harvest what flows through them is another. Opening the channel is only half the equation. The other half is harvesting what flows through it. And this is where most people stumble. They do the spiritual work. They speak EFATÁ with authority. They feel the seals crack and the energy shift, but when abundance starts showing up in unexpected forms, they don't recognize it. They dismiss it. They let it pass right by because it doesn't look like what they expected, or because they're not prepared to receive it. You can have every channel in your energetic field wide open, but if you don't take practical action to capture what's flowing through those channels, the abundance just keeps moving. It doesn't stop and wait for you to notice. It flows to those who are ready, alert, and equipped to receive it. The first practical step is recognition. Abundance doesn't always arrive dressed in obvious packaging. It rarely shows up as a lottery win or an inheritance or a sudden windfall, though those things can happen. More often, it arrives as an introduction to someone who becomes a valuable connection. As an idea that seems random but turns into a profitable venture. As a skill you develop casually that becomes your primary income source. As a conversation that opens a door you didn't even know existed. If you're only looking for abundance in the form of direct cash deposits, you'll miss 90% of what the universe is sending you. You have to train yourself to recognize opportunity in all its forms, even when it's disguised as inconvenience, challenge, or something that requires effort to develop. I learned this lesson the hard way. About 6 weeks into my EFATÁ practice, after I'd broken through several major seals, I started receiving invitations to speak at small local events. No pay, just exposure and the chance to share my message. My first instinct was to decline. I was busy. These events weren't going to make me money directly. They felt like distractions from the real work I needed to be doing. But something inside me, the part that had been opened by EFATÁ, whispered differently. It said, "This is harvest. You just don't see it yet." So I said yes. I showed up, I spoke. And at one of those free events, I met someone who became my largest client for the next 2 years. That relationship generated more income than anything else I'd been working on. But I almost missed it because I didn't recognize the form the abundance was taking. The second practical step is speed. When abundance shows up, you have to move quickly, not recklessly, not without discernment, but quickly. The universe rewards decisive action. When an opportunity presents itself, when a door cracks open, when a resource becomes available, you don't have weeks to deliberate and overthink. You have a window. And that window closes. I've seen people speak EFATÁ, create massive openings in their field, and then watch opportunity after opportunity slip away because they couldn't make a decision fast enough. They wanted to research more, consult more people, wait for absolute certainty. And while they were waiting, someone else stepped through the door they'd been staring at. This doesn't mean you act on every impulse. It means when something aligns with the expansion you've been commanding, when it matches the frequency of your EFATÁ practice. When your gut says yes, even though your fear says wait, you move. You send the email, you make the call, you say yes to the meeting, you invest in the course, you hire the help, you take the risk. Speed is part of the harvest protocol because abundance flows. It doesn't sit still. And if you're too slow to catch it when it passes by your open channel, it moves to someone whose channels are both open and ready. I tested this principle repeatedly after my channels started opening. I noticed that every time I hesitated on an aligned opportunity, it disappeared. Someone else got the contract. The spot filled up. The timing shifted. But every time I moved quickly, even when it scared me, The opportunity expanded beyond what I initially saw. One time, I received an invitation to collaborate on a project with someone I admired. The offer came with a tight deadline. I had 72 hours to decide and commit. My fear wanted to stall. My doubt wanted more time to prepare. But my open channel knew this was harvest, so I said yes within 6 hours. That project became the foundation of a business model I still use today, generating consistent revenue years later. If I'd waited, if I'd missed that window, I'd still be struggling with the same income ceiling I broke through by moving with speed. The third practical step is preparation. This seems contradictory to speed, but it's not. Preparation isn't about waiting until you feel ready. It's about creating systems and structures before the abundance arrives, so you can hold it when it does. Think about a farmer. They don't wait until the harvest appears to prepare their barn and storage containers. They build the infrastructure in advance, so when the crops come in, they have somewhere to put them. You need to do the same with your abundance. If you don't have systems to manage increased income, you'll receive it and lose it just as quickly. If you don't have boundaries in place to protect your energy, you'll attract opportunities and then burn out trying to fulfill them. Preparation is what allows you to sustain the harvest, not just experience it temporarily. For me, this meant setting up financial structures I didn't think I needed yet, opening a separate savings account specifically for abundance that came through unexpected channels, creating invoicing systems before I had clients who required them, establishing rates and service packages before anyone asked for my pricing. It felt presumptuous at the time, like I was preparing for success I hadn't earned. But that preparation was an act of faith that reinforced my EFATÁ practice. I was telling the universe, I'm ready, I have space, I have systems, send it. And when the harvest started flowing, I wasn't scrambling to figure out how to handle it. I already had the containers built. The fourth practical step is gratitude, but not the shallow, performative kind. I'm talking about visceral, embodied appreciation for every single thing that flows through your open channels, no matter how small it seems. When you find $1 on the ground, you celebrate it like you found 100. When someone offers you help, you receive it with the same reverence you'd receive a miracle. When a small opportunity appears, you treat it with the same seriousness you'd treat a massive contract. Why? Because gratitude is a frequency amplifier. It takes whatever abundance you're experiencing and multiplies it. Gratitude tells the universe, yes, more of this. I'm paying attention. I'm receiving with joy. Keep it coming. I started keeping what I called a harvest journal. Every single day, I wrote down every form of abundance that showed up, no matter how insignificant it seemed. A free coffee, a compliment that lifted my spirits, a parking spot right in front of the building, an unexpected refund, a helpful piece of advice, a door held open. All of it went in the journal, and as I did this practice daily, I started noticing patterns. The days I felt most grateful were the days more abundance appeared. The weeks I focused on what was flowing were the weeks the flow increased. Gratitude wasn't just a nice spiritual practice. It was a practical tool that kept my channels open and magnetic. The fifth practical step is circulation. Abundance isn't meant to be hoarded. It's meant to move. When you receive, you must also give. Not from obligation or guilt, but from understanding that you're a channel, not a dam. The energy that flows to you is meant to flow through you. When you circulate your abundance, when you tip generously, when you invest in yourself and others, when you give without attachment to return, you signal to the universe that you trust the flow. You're telling reality, I'm not afraid of running out because I know the source is infinite. I can give freely because I receive freely. And that signal keeps your channels open wider than any amount of EFATÁ practice alone could achieve. I made a commitment after my first significant harvest. For every increase in income, I would immediately circulate a portion of it, not later, not when I felt comfortable, immediately. Sometimes that meant tipping a server an absurdly generous amount. Sometimes it meant buying something for a friend who needed it. Sometimes it meant investing in my own education or tools. The specific action mattered less than the immediacy and the intention. I was practicing being a conduit, not a container. And every single time I circulated abundance quickly after receiving it, more abundance would show up within days. Not because I was bribing the universe, but because I was demonstrating through action that I understood how flow works. The sixth practical step is saying no. This is the step that surprises people because they think harvest means saying yes to everything. But actually, true harvest requires fierce discernment. When your channels open and abundance starts flowing, you'll attract not just aligned opportunities, but also distractions disguised as opportunities. People who want your time, your energy, your expertise for free or cheap. Projects that sound good, but aren't actually aligned with your highest expansion. Relationships that want to consume your newfound resources. If you say yes to everything, you'll dilute your harvest. You'll spread yourself so thin that nothing bears the fruit it was meant to bear. Learning to say no with clarity and without guilt became one of my most important harvest skills. After my income increased significantly, requests started pouring in. Everyone suddenly wanted a piece of my time. Coffee meetings to pick my brain. The partnerships that would require massive energy with minimal return. Invitations to participate in projects that didn't align with my vision. My old self, operating from scarcity, would have said yes to all of it out of fear that saying no meant missing out. But my open self, operating from abundance, understood that saying yes to the wrong things meant saying no to the right things. Every no to what wasn't aligned was a yes to protecting my harvest. The seventh practical step is documentation. Keep records of what's flowing to you, not obsessively, not neurotically, but intentionally. Write down the wins, screenshot the payments, save the testimonials, record the synchronicities. This isn't about ego or proving anything to anyone. It's about creating evidence for yourself that EFATÁ works, that your channels are open, that abundance is real and increasing. On the days when doubt creeps back in, when old patterns try to reassert themselves, when you're tempted to believe nothing has changed, you'll have proof. Documented, undeniable proof that the harvest is real and growing. I kept a spreadsheet tracking every income stream, every unexpected provision, every opportunity that appeared after I started my EFATÁ practice. When I looked at it after 6 months, I was stunned. My income had increased by 230%. But more than that, the sources of income had diversified in ways I never planned or predicted. I had revenue coming from 7 different streams, most of which didn't exist before I started speaking EFATÁ. That documentation became rocket fuel for my faith. It silenced the voice of doubt. It gave me something concrete to point to when my old identity tried to convince me that nothing had really changed. Here's the truth about harvest. It's not passive. It's not automatic. The abundance flows when the channels open, but you have to actively gather it. You have to recognize it, move toward it with speed, prepare systems to hold it, amplify it with gratitude, circulate it to keep it moving, protect it by saying no to what doesn't serve, and document it to reinforce your new reality. These 7 steps transform you from someone who experiences occasional windfalls into someone who lives in perpetual harvest. And in the next chapter, I'm going to show you the proof, the living testimonies, the real stories of people who've used EFATÁ exactly as I've taught you and watched their entire financial reality restructure itself in ways they never thought possible. Testimony is more than storytelling, it's vibrational evidence. When you hear about someone who walked the same desert you're walking and found water, something shifts inside you. Hope transforms from abstract concept into tangible possibility. Your nervous system relaxes its grip on impossibility. Your subconscious starts entertaining outcomes it previously dismissed as fantasy. This is why testimony matters. Not because you need external validation to believe in EFATÁ, but because hearing how this ancient key has opened doors for others gives you permission to expect the same for yourself. An expectation is a frequency. When you genuinely expect abundance, you become magnetic to it. So what I'm about to share with you isn't motivational fluff. It's strategic recalibration of what you believe is possible for your life. Let me tell you about Marcus. He came to me 3 years ago, completely broken financially, 54 years old, divorced, living in his sister's basement, 2 failed businesses behind him, credit destroyed, couldn't get approved for a credit card, let alone a loan. He'd tried everything: vision boards, affirmations, manifestation courses, law of attraction programs. Nothing worked. He was days away from filing bankruptcy when someone told him about EFATÁ. He was skeptical, exhausted, but desperate enough to try one more thing. I walked him through the exact protocol I've given you. Identify the seals, speak EFATÁ with authority, move with speed when harvest appears. He started with his worthiness wound, the belief that he'd failed too many times to deserve another chance. For 21 days, Marcus sat in that basement every morning and spoke EFATÁ over his worthiness seal. He said it even when he didn't believe it. He said it even when his circumstances screamed the opposite. He said it because he had nothing left to lose. On day 18, he felt the seal crack. He described it as a weight lifting off his chest that he'd been carrying so long he forgot it was there. 2 days later, he received a phone call from a former colleague who'd started a company and needed someone with Marcus's exact skill set. They offered him a consulting contract worth more than he'd made in the previous 2 years combined. Within 6 months, Marcus had moved out of his sister's basement, paid off his most pressing debts, and started rebuilding his credit. Within a year, he'd launched his 3rd business, and this time it succeeded because he was operating from an open channel instead of a sealed one. Then there's Jasmine, single mother of 3, working 2 jobs, barely sleeping, student loan debt crushing her. She'd grown up in a religious environment that taught her poverty was holy and that wanting financial comfort was selfish. That spiritual confusion seal had kept her trapped in martyrdom for 15 years. She was sacrificing herself on the altar of noble suffering, and her kids were watching her deteriorate. When she learned about EFATÁ, she initially felt guilty for even trying it. Wasn't she supposed to just pray harder and trust God's timing? But something inside her, the same something that had kept her fighting for her children despite impossible odds, said this was the answer she'd been praying for. She just hadn't recognized it because it came in the form of spiritual authority instead of passive waiting. Jasmine focused her EFATÁ practice on breaking the seal that said prosperity and spirituality were incompatible. Every morning before her kids woke up, she'd sit in her car in the driveway and speak EFATÁ over the lie that God wanted her poor. She commanded that seal to shatter. She declared that her abundance would allow her to serve her family and her community at a higher level. She spoke it for 30 days straight. During that time, her older sister, who she'd been estranged from for years, reached out to reconcile. In the conversation, her sister mentioned that she was looking for someone to manage the administrative side of her growing business. Jasmine had those exact skills, but had never considered them valuable enough to monetize. Her sister offered her a salary that was more than both her current jobs combined, plus the flexibility to work from home and be present for her kids. That opportunity appeared in week 3 of her EFATÁ practice. Jasmine almost said no. Her old programming told her she wasn't qualified, that she'd mess it up, that she didn't deserve to have things be easy. But she remembered the harvest protocol: speed, recognition. When aligned opportunity appears, you move. She said yes. Within 2 months, she'd quit both her exhausting jobs. Her income increased by 60%. Her stress decreased by 90%. Her kids got their mother back. And her faith deepened because she finally understood that the divine doesn't want her suffering. It wants her thriving so she can be a conduit of blessing instead of a monument to endurance. Let me tell you about David and Maria, a couple in their 60s who'd worked their entire lives and had nothing to show for it. They'd done everything right according to conventional wisdom, saved what they could, lived modestly, avoided debt. But unexpected medical expenses and a market crash had wiped out their retirement savings. They were facing the reality of working until they physically couldn't anymore. The generational poverty seal ran deep in both their families. David's grandparents had survived the Depression. Maria's parents were immigrants who'd fled economic collapse. Both of them had inherited the belief that financial security was an illusion and that hard work guaranteed nothing. When they started practicing EFATÁ together, they focused on breaking that generational seal. They spoke it over their combined lineage. They commanded that the curse of perpetual financial instability end with them. They did this practice together every evening for 45 days. During that time, David received a call from a company he'd worked for 20 years prior. They were being sued over a pension miscalculation and had discovered they owed him and several other former employees significant back pay. The amount David received was enough to fully fund the retirement they thought they'd lost forever. Maria, meanwhile, had been sitting on an idea for a small online business but had never pursued it because she thought she was too old to learn new technology. After the seal broke, that limiting belief dissolved. She launched the business. Within 8 months, it was generating passive income that supplemented their retirement in ways they'd never imagined possible. These aren't cherry-picked success stories. These are patterns I've witnessed repeatedly. When people apply EFATÁ with the seriousness and consistency it requires, their financial reality restructures, not because they're special, not because they got lucky, but because they broke the seals that were keeping abundance locked out of their lives. And once those seals shattered, flow found them. Opportunities appeared, resources materialized, synchronicities multiplied. The universe responded to their command because they finally spoke the language it recognizes. But let me also tell you about the people who didn't get results, because they exist too, and their stories are just as instructive. There was Robert, who learned about EFATÁ and tried it once. He spoke the word over his financial blockages, waited a week, saw no immediate change, and dismissed the entire practice as nonsense. He never did the 21-day protocol. He never identified his specific seals. He treated EFATÁ like a lottery ticket instead of a key. His channels stayed sealed because he never applied enough consistent force to crack them. Then there was Linda, who spoke EFATÁ religiously for months but never took action when opportunities appeared. She opened the channels energetically, but refused to walk through the doors that opened. She was so committed to her identity as someone who struggled that she sabotaged every harvest that tried to reach her. And there was Kevin, who used EFATÁ to open his channels but had no boundaries. Money started flowing to him, but he let everyone around him drain it. He said yes to every request. He funded everyone else's dreams while neglecting his own systems. He attracted abundance, but couldn't hold it because he hadn't learned the harvest protocol. Within a year, he was back where he started, convinced EFATÁ didn't work, when really he just hadn't learned how to steward what it released. These failures aren't evidence that EFATÁ is ineffective. They're evidence that the practice requires more than casual engagement. It requires commitment, consistency, courage, and practical action. The people who succeed with EFATÁ are the ones who treat it like the sacred technology it is. They don't dabble, they commit. They speak the word daily, sometimes multiple times per day. They stay alert for the harvest. They move with speed when aligned opportunities appear. They build systems to hold what flows to them. They circulate their abundance to keep it moving. They say no to what doesn't serve. They document their wins. They become students of their own expansion, constantly learning what works and refining their approach. And the result is a life that looks radically different from where they started. Not overnight, but undeniably, irreversibly, permanently. I want you to understand something crucial. Your testimony is being written right now. Every time you speak EFATÁ with authority, you're adding a page. Every time you recognize harvest and move toward it, you're adding a chapter. Every time you choose faith over fear, action over hesitation, gratitude over complaint, you're authoring a story that someone else will need to hear someday. Someone who's standing where you're standing right now. Someone who's desperate for proof that change is possible. Your breakthrough isn't just for you, it's for everyone who will witness it and finally believe that if it happened for you, it can happen for them too. So as you continue this EFATÁ practice, as you walk through the chapters ahead, know that you're not just transforming your own life. You're creating vibrational evidence that ripples out into the collective. You're proving that sealed channels can open, that generational curses can break, that worthiness wounds can heal, that abundance is accessible to anyone willing to speak with authority and move with faith. Your testimony is forming, and it matters more than you know. In the final chapter, I'm going to show you what life looks like on the other side of this transformation, what it feels like to live as an open vessel, what becomes possible when you're no longer fighting against seals, but flowing with unlimited supply. This is where everything you've learned becomes your permanent reality. There's a moment that comes after all the seals have broken, after the channels have widened, after the harvest has become your new normal. A moment when you realize you're not the same person anymore. You don't think the same thoughts. You don't carry the same fears. You don't operate from the same limitations. The old identity, the one that identified with struggle and scarcity and unworthiness, has dissolved completely. And in its place stands someone sovereign. Someone who knows, not hopes, not believes, but knows with cellular certainty that abundance is their natural state. This is the life that awaits you on the other side of consistent EFATÁ practice. Not a life without challenges, but a life where challenges don't close you down. Not a life of endless accumulation, but a life of perpetual flow. This is what it means to live as an open vessel. The first thing you notice is the absence of anxiety around money. It's not that you suddenly have infinite wealth or never think about finances. It's that the desperate, clawing panic that used to grip your chest when you looked at your bank account is gone, completely gone. In its place is a quiet, unshakable trust that what you need will appear when you need it. Not because you're naive or irresponsible, but because you've seen the pattern repeat so many times that your nervous system has recalibrated. You've trained your body to expect provision instead of scarcity. You've proven to yourself, through documented evidence and lived experience, that when you speak EFATÁ and keep your channels open, the universe responds. And once your nervous system accepts this as truth, the anxiety that used to run your life loses its power. I remember the exact moment I realized this shift had occurred in me. I was looking at an unexpected bill, something that would have sent me into a spiral of stress and shame 2 years prior. But as I stared at the number, I felt nothing. No panic, no fear, no mental scrambling to figure out how I'd cover it. Just a calm knowing that the resources would appear. And they did. Within 3 days, I received payment for a project I'd forgotten about, and the amount was enough to cover the bill plus extra. That kind of trust isn't something you can fake or force. It's earned through repetition. Through speaking EFATÁ over every seal, harvesting every opportunity, and watching provision show up so consistently that your subconscious finally surrenders its grip on lack. The second thing you notice is the quality of opportunities that come your way. When you're operating from a closed, contracted state, you attract desperate situations, people who want to extract value without providing fair exchange, projects that drain your energy for minimal return, opportunities that sound good on the surface but are misaligned at the core. But when you're living as an open vessel, when your channels are clear and your frequency is elevated, you start attracting aligned abundance. People who value your expertise and pay you what you're worth without negotiation. Projects that energize you and compensate you generously. Opportunities that feel like partnership instead of exploitation. The difference isn't just in the money. It's in the ease, the joy, the mutual respect that characterizes every exchange. I used to chase every opportunity out of fear that if I didn't grab it, nothing else would come. I worked with clients who drained me, I took on projects I hated because I needed the money. I said yes to things that violated my values because I was afraid to say no. But after my channels opened through EFATÁ practice, that desperation dissolved. I started attracting clients who were excited to work with me, who respected my boundaries, who paid on time without drama. I started receiving invitations to projects that aligned with my skills and my vision. I stopped chasing and started choosing, and the financial results didn't decrease. They multiplied because aligned opportunities produce better outcomes than desperate ones ever could. The third thing you notice is your relationship with time. When you're living in scarcity consciousness, you're always behind, always rushing, always feeling like there's not enough time to do everything that needs to be done. But when you shift into abundance consciousness, when you're operating as an open vessel, time expands. Not literally, but experientially. You stop overcommitting. You stop saying yes to things that don't serve your highest expansion. You start prioritizing activities that generate the most value with the least friction. And somehow, you accomplish more while working less. You have space to rest, to think, to create, to be present with the people you love. This isn't laziness, it's sovereignty. It's the natural result of operating from flow instead of force. I used to work 16-hour days and barely make ends meet. I was exhausted, resentful, and convinced that financial success required constant hustle. But after EFATÁ broke my seals and taught me how to harvest aligned opportunities, my work hours decreased by half while my income tripled. I learned to distinguish between productive action and anxious busyness. I stopped filling my calendar with tasks that made me feel important but didn't move the needle. I started protecting my energy like the finite resource it is. And the result was more money, more impact, and more peace than I'd ever experienced during my years of grinding myself into dust. The fourth thing you notice is the shift in your relationships. When you're living from scarcity, you attract people who mirror that frequency. People who complain constantly, people who drain your energy with their endless crises, people who resent your success and subtly sabotage your expansion. But when you become an open vessel, when you're vibrating at the frequency of abundance, those relationships naturally dissolve. Not through conflict or drama, they just fade. People stop calling, invitations stop coming. And in the space they leave behind, new relationships appear. People who celebrate your wins, people who match your energy and elevate it, people who understand flow and operate from the same sovereign frequency you've stepped into. I lost several friendships during my EFATÁ transformation. People I'd known for years suddenly felt incompatible. Conversations that used to feel normal started feeling toxic. I wasn't angry at them. I just outgrew the dynamic. And while that was painful initially, what replaced those relationships was infinitely more valuable. I attracted mentors who saw my potential and invested in it. I connected with peers who challenged me to think bigger. I built friendships based on mutual growth instead of mutual commiseration. The quality of my relationships became a reflection of my internal state. And that internal state was abundance, sovereignty, and openness. The fifth thing you notice is your capacity to give. When you're operating from scarcity, giving feels threatening. Every dollar you spend on someone else is a dollar you won't have for yourself. Every favor you do depletes your limited reserves. You give grudgingly, resentfully, with silent scorekeeping that poisons the gesture. But when you're living as an open vessel, giving becomes effortless and joyful. You know that what flows through you is infinite. You know that circulation keeps the channels open. You know that generosity is not a depletion, but an amplification. And so you give freely, not to manipulate outcomes or earn approval, but because it feels good to be a conduit of blessing. I used to tip exactly 15%, calculated to the penny, because I was terrified of running out. I'd avoid donating to causes I cared about because I convinced myself I couldn't afford it. I'd say no to helping friends financially, even when I had the resources, because I was hoarding against some imagined future catastrophe. But after my channels opened, after I experienced provision showing up consistently, my relationship with giving transformed completely. I started tipping outrageously, buying groceries for strangers, funding projects that aligned with my values, and every single time I gave freely, more came back. Not as a transaction, as a natural consequence of operating as a channel instead of a dam. The sixth thing you notice is your sense of purpose. When you're trapped in survival mode, your purpose gets buried under the weight of just trying to make it through each day. You dream of making a difference, but you're too exhausted and under-resourced to act on those dreams. But when you become an open vessel, when financial pressure releases its stranglehold on your life, your purpose emerges clearly. You finally have the bandwidth to ask deeper questions. What am I here to create? Who am I meant to serve? What legacy do I want to leave? And more importantly, you have the resources to actually pursue those answers. Abundance isn't the goal. It's the fuel that allows you to fulfill your true purpose without compromise. For years, I knew I was meant to teach, to write, to help people break free from the same limitations that had imprisoned me. But I couldn't pursue that calling because I was too busy scrambling to pay rent. My purpose existed as a quiet ache in my chest, a knowing I couldn't afford to honor. But once EFATÁ opened my channels and abundance started flowing consistently, I finally had the freedom to step fully into my purpose. I could turn down work that didn't align. I could invest in developing my message. I could create content without needing it to generate immediate income. And ironically, the moment I stopped chasing money and started chasing purpose, the money multiplied exponentially, because purpose-driven work carries a frequency that scarcity-driven work never can. The seventh thing you notice, and perhaps the most profound, is the complete dissolution of the need to prove yourself. When you're operating from unworthiness, you're constantly trying to justify your existence. You overwork to prove you're valuable. You overgive to prove you're worthy of love. You chase achievement to prove you matter. It's exhausting and it's endless because no amount of external validation can fill an internal void. But when EFATÁ breaks the worthiness seal, when you step into your identity as an open vessel created in divine image, the need for proof evaporates. You know who you are. You know your value isn't determined by productivity or achievement or other people's opinions. You exist as worthy, and from that place of inherent worth, everything you do becomes an expression of fullness instead of a desperate attempt to fill emptiness. I spent decades trying to earn my right to exist. I worked myself sick trying to prove I deserved success. I people-pleased myself into resentment, trying to prove I was good enough. And none of it worked, because I was trying to solve an external problem with internal strategies. EFATÁ reversed that. It healed the internal wound, and the external striving naturally ceased. I stopped needing to be the smartest, the most successful, the most accomplished. I became comfortable being exactly who I am, with all my flaws and limitations. And paradoxically, the moment I stopped trying to prove my worth, people started recognizing it naturally. Opportunities came not because I was chasing them, but because I was finally aligned with my true frequency. This is the sovereign life. This is what becomes possible when you commit to EFATÁ as a daily practice, when you systematically break every seal, when you learn to harvest what flows through your open channels, when you allow yourself to be transformed from a person who begs for scraps into a person who commands abundance with authority. You don't become someone else. You become who you were always meant to be before fear, shame, and limiting beliefs sealed you shut. You become the open vessel, the clear channel, the sovereign expression of divine abundance moving through human form. And once you reach this state, once you embody this frequency, there's no going back. You can't unknow what you know. You can't unbecome what you've become. So here's my final instruction to you. Take everything you've learned in these chapters and use it. Don't just read it and forget it. Don't treat it like interesting information that you'll get around to applying someday. Start today, right now. Identify your first seal. Speak EFATÁ over it with authority. Commit to 21 days of consistent practice. Stay alert for the harvest. Move with speed when opportunities appear. Build systems to hold what flows to you. Circulate your abundance. Document your wins. And watch with your own eyes as your entire financial reality restructures itself around your new frequency. This isn't theory. This isn't hope. This is a proven protocol that works for anyone willing to apply it with seriousness and consistency. You were not created to struggle. You were not designed to live in perpetual lack. You were born as an open vessel, a conduit for infinite supply, a sovereign being with the authority to command reality through the power of your spoken word. Somewhere along the way, seals were placed over that truth. Seals of unworthiness, seals of fear, seals of generational poverty and spiritual confusion and identity limitation. Those seals have been running your life without your conscious permission. But now you have the key. EFATÁ, the ancient command of opening. The word that breaks every seal and restores every channel. Use it, speak it, trust it, and step into the sovereign life that's been waiting for you all along.